Imagine waking up to a world where the very foundation of our geography has dissolved overnight, leaving us adrift in a liquid blue marble. For thousands of years, humanity has treated the great ice sheets as eternal monuments, frozen giants that define the limits of our maps. But what if these silent sentinels are more like a ticking clock, holding back a version of Earth we haven't seen for millions of years? We often think of the Ice Age as a distant chapter in a dusty textbook, a time of mammoths and primitive survival in the cold. In reality, we are technically still living in an ice age, specifically an interglacial period that has allowed human civilization to thrive and grow. This stability is a rare gift from the Holocene, a brief window of predictable seasons and steady coastlines that we have mistaken for permanence. Today, the Earth's cryosphere, the sum of all its frozen parts, acts as a massive planetary air conditioner, reflecting sunlight back into the void of space. However, this cooling system is failing as global temperatures rise, pushing us toward a threshold where the ice might simply decide to leave. If every glacier and ice sheet vanished, the transformation would be so radical that our current maps would become relics of a lost civilization. To understand this potential future, we must first look deep into the past, to a time when Antarctica was a green, breathing heart. 100 million years ago, the South Pole was not a wasteland of white, but a lush subtropical forest filled with life and noise. Dinosaurs like the armored Ankylosaurus and gigantic long-necked sauropods once wandered through ferns under a sun that never set during the long summers. The fossil record tells us that life finds a way to adapt to extreme light cycles, flourishing even in the months of total winter darkness. Back then, sea levels were nearly 200 meters higher than they are today, creating a planet with vastly different continental shapes and currents. This ice-free Earth isn't a sci-fi fantasy, it is a historical reality that the planet has experienced many times throughout its long tectonic life. Today, the Antarctic ice sheet alone holds 60% of the world's fresh water, a frozen ocean perched precariously on a rocky continent. If this mass were to melt, the sheer volume of water released would be enough to drown the tallest monuments of our modern achievement. We are talking about 71 meters of sea level rise, a global redesign that would wipe out the majority of our coastal infrastructure instantly. But the disappearance of ice isn't just about rising water. It's about a fundamental shift in how our planet moves and breathes. As the weight of the ice lifts, the Earth itself begins to change shape, reacting like a giant spring finally released from a heavy burden. To comprehend the scale of this change, we must look at the Earth not as a static rock, but as a spinning skater. As land ice melts, billions of tons of water shift from the poles toward the equator, redistributing the planet's total mass. This movement increases the Earth's moment of inertia, causing our world to slow its rotation like a skater extending their arms. If Greenland alone were to liquefy, it would stretch the length of every single day by approximately 2 milliseconds. While 2 milliseconds feels like a blink, our modern world is built on the foundation of hyper-precise, synchronized timekeeping. Global positioning systems, satellite communications, and high-frequency trading would fall into chaos as their clocks lost their celestial rhythm. The planet's slowdown is just the beginning. The very axis of our world would begin to wobble and drift. This polar motion could tip the scales of our climate, shifting the jet streams and rearranging the patterns of our seasons. Northern latitudes might find themselves locked in perpetual summer, while southern regions face winters of unprecedented and erratic harshness. Meanwhile, the Earth's crust undergoes a slow-motion transformation known as glacial isostatic adjustment, a planetary memory foam effect. For millennia, the weight of the ice has pushed the continents down into the viscous mantle like a heavy thumb on a sponge. Once the thumb is removed, the land begins to rebound, rising upward as the edges of the tectonic plates sink in response. This isn't just theory. In Scandinavia, ancient ports have already become landlocked as the ground rises over a centimeter every year. In a total melt scenario, this geological bounce-back would be so massive it would reshape the very basins that hold our oceans. But before the land can rise, the water will claim its territory, drowning the centers of human power and culture. New York, London, Tokyo, and Shanghai would not just be flooded, they would become deep-sea archaeological sites for future civilizations. Florida and Denmark would vanish entirely, leaving only memories of where millions of people once built their lives and dreams. Entire nations like Bangladesh would be erased, displacing hundreds of millions of people in the greatest migration in human history. Only Africa might remain relatively recognizable, though its northern coastal gems like Alexandria would be swallowed by the Mediterranean. The map of our world would be redrawn by the hand of the ocean, turning familiar continents into strange, new archipelagos. As the white blankets of Greenland and Antarctica dissolve, they reveal hidden landscapes that have been entombed for over 30 million years. Beneath kilometers of ice, scientists have used radar and satellites to map a world of jagged mountain ranges and deep, silent canyons. Antarctica would emerge as two distinct worlds, a high eastern plateau and a western archipelago of mountainous islands separated by sea. Within this rugged terrain lies the deepest land canyon on Earth, a plunging gorge reaching 3.5 kilometers below sea level. Hidden subglacial lakes, some the size of Lake Ontario, would finally see the sun, potentially releasing ancient microbes into a new atmosphere. But this newly exposed land wouldn't remain a scientific curiosity for long. It would quickly become the most contested soil on the planet. While current treaties ban mining in Antarctica, a world without ice is a world where old laws might be shredded in favor of survival. These pristine continents are believed to hold vast reserves of coal, oil, and the rare earth minerals that power our modern technology. Greenland is already known to house 25 of the 34 minerals deemed critical for the future of the global energy transition. We are already seeing the opening moves of a polar Silk Road as nations scramble to claim ownership over the melting Arctic. With the ice gone, new shipping lanes would open across the top of the world, slashing travel times between east and west. Russia, China, and the United States are already positioning themselves to control these routes, treating the Thaw as a geopolitical goldmine. This scramble isn't limited to governments. Even individual entrepreneurs are finding ways to turn the melting cryosphere into a luxury product. In some regions, ice harvesters collect thousand-year-old glacier chunks from the sea to bottle them as premium, ultra-pure drinking water. In the thawing permafrost of Siberia, tuskers hunt for the remains of woolly mammoths, seeking a lucrative trade in ethical ancient ivory. This white gold rush highlights a dark irony. As we mourn the loss of our climate, some are already calculating the profit. But the cost of this transition far outweighs the value of the minerals we might extract from the newly uncovered mud. The loss of the ice is a positive feedback loop, where less white surface means more heat is absorbed by the dark oceans. This extra heat accelerates the melting of remaining ice, pushing the planet into a runaway warming cycle that is difficult to stop. We are effectively pulling the plug on our own life support system, hoping that the treasure found at the bottom is worth the risk. To understand if we are truly headed for a world without ice, we must ask if this is a freak occurrence or a returning cycle. Throughout Earth's long history, the presence of ice at the poles is actually more of an exception than the rule. During the Eocene epoch, around 50 million years ago, greenhouse gas levels were so high that the planet had no ice at all. Even in more recent history, about 130,000 years ago, the Earth was significantly warmer than it is today. During that interglacial period, sea levels were 6 to 9 meters higher, meaning much of Greenland and West Antarctica had already melted. Today, we are at a crossroads where natural cycles are being hijacked by a massive, rapid injection of human-made carbon dioxide. We have already increased the global average temperature by 1.1 degrees Celsius above the levels seen before the Industrial Revolution. If our current emissions trajectory remains unchanged, we could see a rise of up to 5.7 degrees by the year 2100. Scientists warn that sustaining a warming of just 2 to 3 degrees could trigger an irreversible collapse of the Greenland ice sheet. Once this tipping point is crossed, the melt becomes a self-sustaining process that no amount of future carbon cutting can stop. While a total melt of East Antarctica might take thousands of years, the pace of change we are seeing now is geologically instantaneous. It is the difference between a slow, rhythmic seasonal thaw and a sudden, catastrophic burst of a planetary dam. One of the most terrifying variables in this equation is the albedo effect, the measure of how much light a surface reflects. Ice is the planet's mirror, but as it thaws, it reveals the dark ocean and soil, which act like a black t-shirt in the sun. This creates a feedback loop where the warmer the planet gets, the faster it loses its ability to cool itself down. Below the ice, another sleeping giant waits, the permafrost, containing vast amounts of trapped methane, and ancient organic matter. As the ground thaws, microbes begin to digest this organic material, releasing methane, a greenhouse gas much more potent than carbon dioxide. This methane bomb could bypass human efforts entirely, creating a warming cycle driven by the Earth's own biological processes. We are not just spectators to this change. We are the primary catalysts of a transformation that usually takes eons. The question is no longer if the ice will melt, but how much of it we can save before the map changes forever. Beyond the rising tides and shifting axes, the loss of Earth's ice would trigger a collapse of the invisible conveyor belts that regulate our climate. Ocean currents, like the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, are driven by the delicate balance of temperature and saltiness in the polar waters. As trillions of tons of cold, fresh meltwater pour into the North Atlantic, they threaten to dilute the salty engine that keeps these currents moving. If this engine stalls, the Gulf Stream, the warm blanket that keeps Europe habitable, could veer off course or shut down entirely. We would be left with a paradox, a world that is heating up globally while certain regions face localized brutal cooling and agricultural failure. This isn't just a weather report, it's the potential death of the predictable climate that allowed the human species to transition into farmers. But even as we face these existential threats, there is a human instinct to look for the silver lining in the most catastrophic of changes. For some, the melting of the ice is not a tragedy, but the ultimate real estate opportunity on a planet that is running out of space. An ice-free Greenland could theoretically support agriculture and forests once again, becoming a new frontier for a displaced global population. However, the soil beneath the ice is often acidic or nutrient-poor, requiring centuries of biological labor to become truly productive and green. The geopolitical friction over these new lands would likely be intense, as nations move to secure strategic depth in a warmer world. We are already seeing the first signs of this in the high north, where military bases are being expanded as the ice retreat becomes permanent. The Arctic is no longer a frozen buffer zone between superpowers. It is becoming a central arena for 21st century competition and conflict. In this world without ice, the concept of territorial waters becomes a moving target, leading to potential disputes over new islands and shoals. Small-scale entrepreneurs are also adapting, extracting fossilized treasures from the mud that were hidden since the dawn of the Holocene. From ancient ivory to preserved DNA of extinct megafauna, the melting ground is a treasure chest that comes with a very high price tag. But we must ask ourselves, is a bottle of glacier water or a mammoth tusk worth the loss of the systems that keep us alive? The value we place on these resources reflects our struggle to prioritize long-term planetary health over short-term economic gain and novelty. We are currently living through the most significant experiment in Earth's history, and we are both the scientists and the test subjects. As the ice thins, the margin for error in our global response shrinks, forcing us to confront the reality of our shared destiny. As we peer into this fluid future, we must recognize that the melting of the cryosphere is not just a loss of scenery, but a loss of scale. For the first time in human history, we are witnessing the physical transformation of our planet's silhouette in real time. The sheer volume of 71 meters of sea level rise is difficult to visualize until you see the world's landmarks as coastal buoys. Imagine the Burj Khalifa or the Eiffel Tower standing as lonely needles in an endless, sun-drenched sea of turquoise. This redistribution of weight would not only slow our clocks, but could trigger a surge in volcanic and seismic activity across the globe. As the pressure of the ice is removed from the Earth's crust, dormant volcanoes in Antarctica and Iceland might wake from their long slumber. The planet is an interconnected organism, and when you pull a thread as massive as the polar ice, the entire tapestry begins to unravel. We often wonder if we are the first civilization to face such a crisis, or if we are repeating a forgotten cycle of rise and fall. Archaeology tells us that past societies often collapsed when the climate they relied upon shifted by even a few degrees. But unlike our ancestors, we possess the tools to see the catastrophe coming and the technology to potentially alter its course. The Greenland tipping point is not just a scientific metric, it is a moral alarm bell ringing for a species that prefers to hit snooze. We are currently investing billions into space exploration, looking for life on icy moons like Europa while our own ice is slipping away. There is a profound irony in searching for water on Mars while failing to manage the water that is currently drowning our own cities. If we allow the ice to vanish, we are essentially choosing to live on a new Earth, one that is younger, hotter, and much more volatile. This new Earth would have no memory of the Holocene, the 10,000 years of stability that allowed us to build our cathedrals and computers. To prevent this, we must transition from being planetary exploiters to being planetary stewards, a shift that requires a global ego death. It means valuing a glacier in a remote corner of the world as much as we value the stock market or the latest digital trend. The solutions are not mysterious. They involve a radical decoupling from the carbon that has fueled our progress for 2 centuries. Every fraction of a degree we prevent is a city saved, a culture preserved, and a future path that remains open to us. We are writing the final chapters of the world as we know it, but the ending has not yet been set in stone or ice. As we reach the edge of this hypothetical world, we are forced to realize that the mystery of the ice is actually a mirror. Our fascination with an ice-free Earth reveals our deep-seated fear of our own power and the unintended consequences of our ingenuity. We find ourselves in a strange paradox, where we are both the masters of the planet and its most vulnerable inhabitants. The disappearance of the cryosphere would be a final, irreversible testament to the end of the world as a manageable, predictable garden. But even in the face of such a monumental shift, life on Earth has a resilient habit of finding new ways to exist. Just as the dinosaurs once thrived in an Antarctic jungle, new ecosystems would eventually rise from the mud and the rising tides. The true question is not whether the Earth will survive without its ice, but whether our civilization is flexible enough to follow. We are the only species that builds its homes on the assumption that the sea will never move and the seasons will never fail. This rigid thinking is our greatest weakness, yet our ability to imagine the future is our most potent tool for survival. By visualizing the world without ice, we give ourselves the chance to decide that we aren't ready to let it go just yet. There is something deeply poetic about a species that can track the history of the stars while standing on a melting ice floe. Perhaps the value of the ice isn't just in the cooling it provides, but in the humility it demands of those who live beside it. Every glacier we preserve is a bridge to a future where we didn't have to learn the hard way how the planet works. The transition to a sustainable world is the greatest engineering challenge we have ever faced, requiring more than just machines and money. It requires a new philosophy of existence, one where we view ourselves as a small part of a vast, ancient, and delicate system. The mystery of the melting world is not a puzzle to be solved for profit, but a warning to be heard for our own preservation. As the sun rises on our current, still frozen world, we have the rare privilege of holding the remote control to our destiny. Will we continue to watch the ice dissolve, or will we find the collective courage to keep the thermostat of our home stable? The map of the future is being drawn right now, in the choices we make and the values we choose to live by today. In the end, the most amazing thing about the ice is that it is still here, and for now, so are we.